Rosa. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatal min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum and welcome everybody to our fourth session. Alhamdulillah, as we progress with the sessions, from the feedback that we're receiving, adapting the session. So I'll start explaining where we're at first. Sorry, I just need to figure out how to get my slides going. Something going on there. So let's do a slideshow from the beginning. So with these sessions, I really appreciate if we can get some input, or even if you've got a pen and paper, you can write down some points for yourself, because the way I work is helping people understand themselves and making changes. So it's about implementing what information we share in the context of yourself, because it's nice that for us, is there some background noise there? Just if everybody could be on mute, please. But from the information that I share, I've realized that it's better to go slowly so you can then kind of relate it to yourself. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, why do we need good mental health, especially at a time like this? I'm sure everybody's aware, but if you could think about in the context of what you're experiencing, what you're seeing around you, because then it'll make this session more kind of accommodating to your needs. If there's a question you've got in your head, why do I need to improve my situation? I'm going to give you a minute, and if there's anything, if everybody's got some points, if there's anything you can share, inshallah, on this. It's a very vague, open question. Why do we need good mental, emotional, psychological health? Because alhamdulillah, this is why you've attended, to kind of work on these areas or become more aware of how these things work. So there must be a reason behind it. Shall I carry on, Feroza? Okay, well, I've got some examples. No feedback on that? Shall I carry on?
You can carry on.
Did you want us to put it in the chat, or do you want us to just make a note ourselves?
You can do either. You know, if somebody shares it on the chat, what happens then is people become aware of what's going on for other people as well. And it's like then you're sharing information from your side, and it helps me understand how to adapt these sessions. And the way I work the sessions, it'll help me as well, guide me as well. So if it's not just now, even towards the end, but if you've got something to share now, I'm happy to take note of it.
So the 2 points I've got so far: to function in our daily lives, to make decisions, and a lot of stress and changes in life. So we have the strength to help those around us, to take care of ourselves, to live life to the full in a positive way. That's nice.
Yeah, I like that one.
To get through on a day-to-day basis, looking after family, vulnerable, especially with COVID. Yeah, that's true. So some very good points.
There is, mashallah. And what I've noticed is it's nice because there's a bit of a balance here that, yeah, we should look after our own needs, but alhamdulillah, quite a few of them about looking out for others. So alhamdulillah, that's a more complete life. And inshallah, we're going to try and come towards that point as we go along in today's session. So I'm glad you've shared that with me, because it feels like, inshallah, we're on the right path then. But this will also help me tailor what I do in the future sessions, inshallah. Jazakallah. So I think some of the points you've made kind of match what I've put. So we're on the same wavelength. Live a fulfilling life, reach our potential. Yeah, why not? And yeah, the healthy relationships is a massive reason why I see people, because people tend to kind of cope with their own stuff, push to one side, and they can function, but it's when the interaction is affected, especially when it's close family. And adaptable in situations. So day to day, you have to be adaptable when you've got so many demands, especially right now with the virus. Jazakallah. Right. Something I don't know if I've mentioned that if you've got a pen and paper, just keep jotting things down, because what I'll do is, as well as asking questions.
Bila dia dapat duit banyak, dia
I think we've got somebody speaking on. Should everything be put on silent for Rosa?
Does Malaysia have a don't judge a book by its cover?
I can't do that.
Can I ask everybody to put their speakers on silent?
Have we got Moto GS first?
Who is that? Moto, have you got your speaker on? If you could just... Oh,
if
okay,
everybody could please mute.
So what I'm going to do now is just recap a little bit on what we've covered in the previous session, so you can understand how I've got here, because to be honest, I didn't have a plan of how I'm going to progress. I like the fact that I'm able to adapt according to what input I'm getting. It makes it much more realistic for me, because I don't really want to just go and just follow one session after another for the sake of it. So what we've done in the past is, like Feroza said initially, is looked at anxiety and depression, because those are the two things that pop out in our head when we think about mental health. So as you can see from the pictures, when somebody is anxious, they're in alert mode. That's
don't get heels over head.
I did it.
You'll have to mute on your side, because I'm not admin. Go into more and it'll say mute everyone.
If I go into participants, mute all.
Yeah.
That'll do. I think we're good. So then they'll have to, oh, Feroz, I've muted you as well. Let me
No, I can unmute. We can unmute ourselves. It's fine.
Okay, I'm going to come out of that choice. Oh, I've learnt something new. So back to anxiety and depression. That was something like we covered, just to give people an awareness of how things can affect you.
So Sajid, I can't see your slides, yeah?
Oh, what happened there? Okay, sorry. Let me just go back into Zoom. All right, I am on Zoom and it shows.
Okay, no, somebody else can see it. So it should be fine. It should be mine. It's fine. They can see it.
Yeah, it can be seen.
They can see it. It's probably my computer.
Oh, that's good. Good to have communication. Alhamdulillah. So when we looked at the two on the third session, I wanted to show that actually you can have both anxiety and depression. It can feel like a pretty manic state when you're dealing with both, but by identifying what's going on physically, mentally, emotionally, how we can work the two together. I can't really go into that today, but that just helps kind of place why I'm doing this session today. And actually what feedback I got from last session was there was a lot to take in, so it was difficult for people to walk away with something to implement. So what I've decided to do is the emotions is something people found a bit kind of vague to tap into. So my next question for you guys to have a think about, because this is the area we're going to explore today, is emotions, rather than going into too much in one go. But inshallah, what I am comfortable to do is cover the emotions in detail and then come back to this. So it's not like we won't come back to depression and anxiety. So the question I have for you guys to note is, do we need emotions? Please do give me some input, because I need to know where you're at, because that's a bit different to mental health, because it depends how you see mental health and how you kind of address emotions, or how other people need address emotions. And if anybody wants to share anything, they can put their hand up. Give it a minute or two. Think of what kind of things are good about having emotions and what things are negative, because there are going to be the positive and the negative for us all. And if you can share one.
So I've got yes. Another one says yes, as emotions play an important role in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I'd go for no, but then you would miss out on the positive emotions, because life would be a lot simpler without emotions.
I could pick your brain about that, but that's the more interesting stuff in my work. When somebody says can't do it, I'm just like, oh, let's open it up nice and big. But I do it without very cool.
Yeah, too many positives out on.
Is there positives?
Yes, emotions help express to others people how we feel. Yeah. A form of communication. Yeah. Come on, people. Anybody else? Come and join in.
Well, I'll get some rolling because I've noted some.
Nazia, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, basically, what it is I feel that it is important that we have our emotions. Some people have mentioned about we need to. It's a form of communication. It's expressing our own feelings for what we're feeling. So if we're angry, we're going to show that emotion. If we're upset, we're going to show that emotion. So it's for our own well-being to release that feeling. That's another way of expressing it.
So
Nice.
Nadia, seems like you're quite free with your emotions, mashallah. So it sounds like you don't need to hold them back, because in a way your feelings are part of you. You're saying I need to let them come out because they want to say something.
Yeah, because what can happen is I don't know, because you can block them, and then they can fest within yourself, and then it can be, I don't know, from my own experience, then they become outbursts eventually.
Okay. Thank you for being so honest. So what we're going to do is look at actually what happens when they sit underneath as well at some point. Now, adding to what you've just said, you've said it makes us human, mashallah, helps us connect with ourselves first before connecting to others. It gives us a deeper level of understanding of the situation. And I think what we'll notice about emotions, it's like it's beyond your mental logic, although it is connected to that. And another thing is that when people say, oh, emotions, they get in the way, they're holding back their inner growth because of that deeper level of understanding of themselves. Am I going too fast? Let me know, I'll slow down. Yeah?
No. We just had a few more comments. We need to see the positive in all emotions, make us feel alive. Yes, we do need emotions because we need to understand ourselves.
Yeah.
A form to connect with others. Just a couple more. We need to consider other people's emotions and be aware every time of how others may feel from other reactions. Very good. Nice. And emotions, emotions would help us relate to others better.
So then we're getting to the point where, again, we've got a bigger, broader picture that if we're looking out for what other people are feeling, then we need to be in tune with ourselves. And yeah, alhamdulillah, that's where we're heading today. So it seems like you guys, you're on the right workshop, inshallah. Yeah, another thing is that because I work with the Islamic model, alhamdulillah, when somebody comes for the first few sessions, I can see that they look run down, even without saying something, and they'll be talking, but you can still see that they're a bit stuck. But mashallah, when there's change and they feel a sense of ease, it's like their whole face, it kind of, the heaviness or the tension, just on Zoom even, it feels like it's reduced and they look a bit different. And with emotions, what that is it works from a deeper spiritual level. So it works with your soul. So when you're connected in a place where your soul is at ease, mashallah, everything else becomes more in tune. So it's easy to look at the positive, but let's be honest, like Feroza said, there's plenty of negatives in it, because it's hard work working with your emotions, because there isn't something that tells you that do A, B, C, D, and that's it. It's not like a medication where you can just take something and the problem sorted. It's quite deep and quite personal, and depending on like what the situation is and how old you are, things do fluctuate. So it's something that you have to tap into but maintain as well. And also with emotions, I think the big barrier is that whether other people find it acceptable, that how emotionally in tune you are, it's how people take it. So it's good that we're saying, well, we should be in tune with other people. And I think it takes strength of character in some societies where emotions are not freely expressed for somebody to feel comfortable sharing. Okay, thank you for sharing. Now I'm going to go back to anxiety when I get the slide up, because we can see from this that there's so many things going on underneath the surface with us as humans, because what we see is only fractional of what we're experiencing. But to go underneath the surface, you've got to give yourself permission, don't you? Because it's an area where it seems a bit more risky than dealing with the stuff at the surface. So with anxiety, you might notice that you can feel helpless or hurt, insecure. You can have a few of them, can't you? That's the thing. But it doesn't, because we're labeling them as that, that doesn't mean it's one or the other. And I think this is what we have to explore. So there's a lot happening underneath the surface that we don't see, but that's quite insightful and it's experiential. That means that nobody's going to give you the direction until it's happening for you. But when it's happening, that's when the real learning happens. And that's why I suppose as therapists, people come to us, because when you're experiencing something and it's not comfortable, you want somebody else to kind of hold on to you and help you understand, make sense of it. But inshallah, with these sessions, that's what I'm trying to do. It's the kind of work I do in therapy. I'd like to break it up and let you guys kind of ask me questions so we can open it up more, really, before problems become so you're stuck. So what also happens is, I just want to mention again, like with me working with the Islamic model, because the physical side and the soul side, that's all part of us. So I do question when I see people that actually, are you noticing what your soul is experiencing? And when, you know, we think about how our soul experiences things as well, we need to have that emotional input. I'm just going to point out, like we've already kind of mentioned the benefits of understanding our emotions. I'm just going to go into it a bit deeper. When we look at the variety of emotions from the pictures, you can see that it takes you to different places. It's like you experience different aspects of life. And what I've put here is, when you understand and relate to yourselves, then we can relate to better to others. And it seems like people who've given feedback appreciate that, and forming healthier relationships. And also this thing about empowering yourself in choices. What that means is when your emotions don't take control of you, yeah, because usually emotions creep up, and the way I think we're seen, sometimes we see ourselves, is we have to figure things out mentally and get on with the job. But then if our emotions are not playing a part, that means that we're coming from a place where we are compromised. Whereas if we are in tune with our emotions and accepting, that means it's part of the solution. And that means that we can show greater restraint, because you're going to make better choices, inshallah. And overall, emotions, we know that people who struggle emotionally will have physical and obviously mental health issues if it's more long-term ongoing. And the point I want to kind of emphasize is, be accepting of yourselves. This is the thing, in it, that as humans, we are going to miss out if we don't feel what we need to feel. And that can be kind of very different depending on your situation and, you know, what's acceptable. But it's about letting ourselves go a little bit, like the lady who spoke up, was it Nazia, who said, let yourself go a little bit, because we need to experience life, really.
So Saj, there was a couple of other comments about emotions. Should have emotions to try to turn your negative emotions into a positive one to get through. And
Sorry, you want to turn the negative into positive?
Yeah, to turn negative emotions into positive ones to get through. So it's to help you get through the day, basically, helping to work with your emotions in that way.
All right.
And the other one was, I think it's important to talk about how you feel if there is a problem. Talking about it relieves the stress.
Yeah.
So it's good, it's good.
This is great, because what we're saying is we want that opening, but it's checking in who we can have that opening with to share our emotions. And what we're going to look at through this emotional intelligence kind of, it's a model. It's like a modern day model, and it breaks things up. And you can then check in with yourself that actually, am I following this model? Is there bits of this model that are missing? So we'll start with, first, what you need to do is have an ability to identify your own emotions. And that's quite a big, broad area. And if it's something that you haven't done before, I think we need to kind of look at what it means. That's what we're going to do. What does it mean to identify your emotions? Whereas some of you who might feel comfortable identifying your own emotions might kind of, through this workshop, help us kind of share with us that what does that mean for you? Because with it only being an hour session, like nearly halfway through already, I want to focus on one area before we move on to the next bit. And then the next area we can look at is understand your emotional response. So based on what you experience, what would you feel comfortable? What would be a good option for you at that time? Because you need to kind of then express that emotion. And then to regulate and manage your emotion, that means that you deal with the emotion, but usually what I find with people is that emotion just lingers and it becomes something else. It adds on to something else and it becomes like quite big to handle. And then, like people have said, then with us knowing what is emotionally kind of regulating for us, we'll be in a better position to understand and communicate and take on other people's emotional state. But obviously, if we're communicating with others and trying to understand them, but we're not sure where our own emotions sit, things can get muddled up, and with the communication, it might not be very clear in situations such as, you know, if I came out of a stressful situation, I'm carrying that stress with me, and then I'm coming home, and if my kids are wanting my attention, it's going to be compromised, but also my reaction might be as a result of the stress I brought into the house. But what I can do is, if I understand that I am compromised, I can give myself some breathing space. Now, this is actually just a model, but I'm just going to pause for a minute, because if we understand what I'm trying to say here, then it's good for me to carry on. And another thing I'll just add to that is, I'm sure you guys appreciate that these qualities, they're not prescriptive, as I keep saying. You know, when somebody comes to me for therapy, first it's important I understand their story, what's affecting them. I'm not going to tell two people that the same way of approaching a situation, even if the problem seems the same from the outside, because it's about how it's affecting them. So, like when we're exploring for ourselves as well, we need to kind of first look around the emotions as well, put it into context, explore with it. And emotions, they can change. You know, in a day you could have quite a few different kinds of emotions if you feel comfortable like going with it rather than holding on. But in a way that can be very like, you know, full of life. You can then kind of step back and associate that I experienced this, I enjoyed it, I experienced that, it wasn't so good, but there was a reason behind it. So you're getting more out of your experiences. So if I can just pause for a minute, because I'm not sure whether everybody feels comfortable with what I've shared, or is this new to you? And, you know, from what you've shared so far, it seems like you guys have got an idea that this is where we need to start from, our own emotions, which is what we're going to cover today, and then work our way up.
Can you hear me, Sajida?
Yeah.
So, comment, we all have to deal with positive and negative emotions, but being in control of our emotions in the right way will lead us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Oh,
Yeah. Another comment, how do we control our stress and anxiety when we ourselves are not happy with the emotions we are feeling? How can we cope when talking does not help? We cannot control how we feel sometimes, despite identifying the emotions. I second that. Definitely.
Hang on, you lost me on the third one. Talking doesn't help. And what's the fourth one?
No, the third one. There's another one. Hang on. So how do we control our stress and anxiety when we ourselves are not happy with the emotions we are feeling? How can we cope when talking does not help? We cannot control how we feel sometimes, despite identifying the emotions. And there's one last one. I've struggled mostly with the male mahrams in my life. Unfortunately, they don't have much emotional intelligence and cannot communicate well. It has left me struggling with neglect and rejection and isolation. As you say, it becomes something else and difficult to handle. I hate it. And although I try to grow the best I can, it's frustrating and I worry about my own kids. I totally understand. Yeah.
Oh, guys, you've done amazing. Thank you for sharing all this. I suppose I can't go too much into the last point because that's quite, it seems like you've done what you could to manage your situation, but you can't kind of work with a situation where it's a block in it, that if somebody is not allowing you to be emotionally kind of in tune and they're blocking you out, I think that's quite a big area. And when somebody said talk.
So for that last person, if you want to stay on at the end when it's not being recorded, maybe Sajida can talk to you more personally then.
I would love to, yeah. If you could, inshallah, because I do feel I can't open that up because I don't want to just dive in there. But the main thing, what you've said is you've tried to work on yourself. So it's about turning to what else you can do. So like you say, your children, they're not affected, but then maintaining, it's hard work in it, maintaining your own self-care in those situations. So please do if you can. As far as talking doesn't help, I think it depends who you're talking to. And in a way, therapy is where, like these sessions, it's in a pocket size. You take what information you need and then you work on something, and usually it gives you a lot of self-awareness. So that'll be interesting, why talking doesn't help, but I can't really work with anything more at the moment. All I can say is it depends who you're approaching and what kind of qualifications or understanding or how much self-care they've got. You obviously don't want to talk to too many people either. Control of stress. Stress is kind of related to the anxiety side of things, which we covered in the first two sessions. And it is a very, like I'm a CBT therapist, so with anxiety, when I see somebody mainly wants to work on that area, I would look at the cognitive behavioral therapy model. So alhamdulillah, with anxiety, it's something that's a reaction, and we can usually break it down somewhere so you can manage it better. As far as, alhamdulillah, yeah, being emotionally in tune with your emotions, Islamically, yeah, we do then have a better connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because what we have to do is realize when we're blocking parts of ourselves out, when we're not emotionally in touch with ourselves, then our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be compromised, because we want to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with an open heart, don't we? We want to share everything, we want to ask for everything, we want to ask for His mercy. But also when we're holding stuff back, that'll kind of, it usually kind of gets in the way. So when we talk about the Islamic model, whoever's mentioned that, we normally say that it's your qalb, it's through your heart, and your qalb is where your emotions come from, with the qalb is where the connection through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more clear, inshallah. Jazakallah. I shall move on, Firoza. So we're just going to look at the ability to identify our own emotions today. So it's okay to feel your emotions. See, not everybody can do that for themselves. So it's about, why is it not? We would have to ask ourselves in certain situations, is it because of other people's response? And if we understand what's holding our emotions back, then we have to create that opening, that where is it okay to have these emotions? Because the problem here is that when we start blocking out the bad emotions, more than likely the good emotions are going to follow as well, because that means we can't, it's difficult to just control one aspect of emotions. Then you fall into that hole of, well, I might as well just chuck all the emotions in there, and then again, you're limiting yourself. Like, because I want to put some meaning into what it means to work with your emotions, the best place I found is through this book, With the Heart in Mind. And this talks about in this book, Sheikh Michael Ahmed Smith talks about emotional intelligence through the life of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in the book, it explains how Prophet ﷺ was very free in expressing his own emotions, and how he connected with others, and that's how he was able to open people's hearts up, get their trust. And in a time when Prophet Muhammad was passing his message to the people, that was a time when people were very harsh and quite shut off from their feelings. I'll give you some examples. So from our Prophet Muhammad's time, you know, there was hadith, and there was kind of people who have mentioned that in himself there were times when, like, he showed that it's okay to cry. So people saw that when his son passed away and he was holding him in his hands, and he was crying and tears were coming down, and somebody said, "Even you, O Prophet," and he said to this person, "This is a sign of mercy." And there was a time when I think he was in namaz, and a child climbed onto his back, and he stayed in sajda for a long time whilst the child was still playing. And then after the child came down gradually by themselves, then the other sahabis in the salat, they said, "Oh, was that like a special namaz that you were praying? Because that was a really, really long sajda." And he said, "Well, no, because I was just waiting for the child to come off." And he, mashallah, Prophet Muhammad, he has many examples of where he showed compassion to the children and the way he expressed himself. And, you know, the times when he was joyful. And at the time, like I say, when, you know, the men were quite harsh, and there was not, you know, it wasn't a just time. But you know, what I'm trying to say is, when we look at the examples of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best way is to learn from his actions, and then it becomes more of a sunnah way as well, inshallah. I could talk about more stories, but we're quite limited for time. But that's why I'm really emphasizing that it's this speaker, he's got some YouTube videos. What I'll do is, on my website, I'll put his YouTube videos on, because he explains it really well. He's a specialist in this area. And then also, not just from our Prophet Muhammad Wasallam's time, when we look at the stories of the other prophets, when they conveyed their message, they had to have this emotional intelligence to reach the people. So Musa alayhi salam, even though he had a stutter, mashallah, he went to Pharaoh, didn't he? And he was able to convey the message, because it's not just what you say, it's how you portray the message. So coming back to that first point about ability to identify your own emotions, so it's tapping into, where do your emotions sit? So when you welcome your emotions as teachers, like other people have mentioned, even the ones that are painful, there's something that we can learn from it. And if we can't learn from it, it gives us a different kind of growth. So if we start off by first, if we're not familiar with how our emotions sit with us, we question that actually, how do we introduce something that we can't recognize? And this is something we're going to look at. And also, are we ready? You know, we have to make that decision ourselves, that do we want to open up this thing that sounds really good and there's lots of value and experience in it, but let's try and think of a time when it is going to be possible, because if life is quite demanding, you don't want to just compromise yourself and look into things. I think it's finding that opening when it works for you. So what we need to do is be curious about what's going on for us, and do it in a more open, light-hearted way if you can. Obviously, if there's a lot going on, you might need that extra kind of support, and you might have to lean on somebody. It depends how intense your emotional situation is. So we're going to start off first by acknowledging and developing your emotional vocabulary. That doesn't have to be just choosing the words, but that's one approach that I'm going to share with you today. And with some emotions, there can be meanings. I'm not saying you always have to look for meanings, because sometimes when I work with people, it's just getting that feeling and doing something with it. And usually that feeling is just sat there holding everything else back, just acknowledging that actually that's how I feel. So usually when I've kind of worked with people with anxiety, and they'll be saying, but this is what happened, and this is how I thought of it, and why is it doing that? So they're replaying a lot of stuff. But what they don't realize is they're holding on to that feeling, but they don't know how to tap into it. So what I would then do is, whilst they explain it, I'll say, hang on, just stop a minute. What did you feel just then? And they find it really hard, some of these people who are more like mentally thinking. But actually, when they do tap into it, it just feels like they've let something come and let it loose and let it be. So it's like tapping into it for yourself. What does it actually mean for you, as in what you're experiencing? But it doesn't always mean you have to put a meaning with it, but certain situations it helps because there's a trigger there that makes the feeling reoccur if you've got like past history related to it. I'm going to stop there because I feel like I'm getting into this bit, and if there are any questions about this, I'm going to explain how to look at the vocabulary. I'm not going to look too much into the meaning because there's so many different approaches to that, and I work with cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm just going to give it a minute and see if anybody's got any questions. I hope this is like a steady pace for you guys, because I'm backtracking a little bit. I think in the previous sessions I was going a bit fast and dishing out a lot of information. I've just slowed down a bit because even if some people do understand it, I feel like I need to cover the basic stuff before I progress in the future sessions. And anybody who is struggling with this side of it, like I said, we need to then look at how you can make changes if you want that. Yeah.
So there's a comment, Saj. Does it take time to identify the triggers for certain emotions?
I think it's a difficult one if you're doing it by yourself and you haven't got the insight, or you haven't got like a past experience of working through it. So usually a trigger, if it's happening right then and there, like as a therapist, I would say, tell me about the situation and what was going on. And usually the person going through it, it's all a big whoosh. But the person who's looking from the outside, who's got experience of breaking things down, obviously I've been trained at how to tap in and break things down in the cognitive behavioral model. So I would explore. Even for me, I wouldn't just go in there and say it's that. It's better to explore more and then home in on it, so we're not kind of missing something. Whereas if it's something from the past, it's much more difficult. If it's a trigger that happened in the past and that's the main cause, and then you're holding on to the trauma, because then you have to revisit some of that as well and put meaning to it. Because usually when something happens, it's a big whoosh of an event, but that trigger has then impacted your fear response or the insecurity, but you're not usually aware of it. I think in those situations, if you haven't had any support, it's best to go to somebody. Whereas if I'm working with somebody with anxiety, I do look at different things before I tap in. I give it 1 or 2 sessions where I look at relationships, how they feel about themselves, because it's a delicate area, and it's important that we give that person that space to explore rather than being like dictative. Is that okay anymore?
What if you can't think of a reason or cause for an emotion? Can it be purely chemical?
Yeah, but that's what I was saying earlier. And this one, are there any associated meanings? Yeah, because when I see people and I feel from their story that things are very vague, but the amount of emotion they're expressing is quite intense, I would recommend, like, do you need to kind of get a blood test done? Or some things can be hereditary. So we definitely shouldn't exclude any of that. And also, you know, Islamically, there are other things, other treatments like herbalists and stuff. We in Ehsan, where I work, we look at a bigger picture. I suppose with emotions, if you feel comfortable and you've got that opening for yourself, then we should look at the other areas if they're affecting how you are functioning. And chemicals is a massive thing, and there's, you know, at times there will be times when medication is your best option.
So can I just question this yet? So if something has happened, it's a bad experience, and I feel very negative, and part of that I know is just something that's built up in the past, but something has triggered it now. How can I sit down and figure out what emotional state I'm in? How do I figure out what the trigger is? How can I improve my mood? What can we do ourselves?
I suppose when we start this, we're going to look at how do you identify the emotion? Do you feel fear? Do you feel threat? Do you feel loss? What do you feel right now? But to go back to the past is a bit harder because you can make a bit of a mishmash out of it. But it's always good to jot down, like maybe have a little diary when you're experiencing the situation, because you know what it's like when you're in the situation, it's very real. So that's where all the valuable, like, you know, the gold lies whilst you're experiencing. Either write it initially or kind of notice if you've got into the swing of it. But you can't just note, that's what I'm saying, you can't just notice a trigger till you've explored a few areas. And can you be sure that it was related to that event? And what has it compromised in you? Because it's done something, it's made you feel something about yourself. So when something similar, it doesn't even have to be the same context, when something similar makes you feel that way, then it's caused a reaction. So if I give you an example, where in a friendship in the past, if somebody's kind of compromised my trust, and that means that I felt abandoned, so that's what I was left with, and that was a big shock to me because it came out of the blue. But then in smaller situations right now, if somebody like in the family, they disregarded me in a conversation, because I'm holding on to that feeling of abandonment, that trigger might be slightly different, but it'll make me feel that way. So then what I have to do is heal that abandonment feeling inside me. Does that help understand that it's not that straightforward to just associate one with another, yourself? And that's when we go to therapy, we open it up in a targeted way. So we're not opening too much, but we find the connection. But we always work with our present way of coping, and what does that mean to us? Usually it's about how it's affected us. Go on.
Can I just give you one more, right? I don't know how to get past some feelings. I have sat with the emotions and tried to say it's the past now and doesn't define my future. It's defined 2.5 decades of my life. Very hard to see a brighter future. I hold on to reliance on Allah's plan is better. I have to be patient whilst trying to change my condition.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
So maybe you might want to. Maybe you might want to talk.
I just want to point out that when we have, mashallah, good faith, and we feel in ourselves that I'm turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I put my trust in there, but that doesn't deny the fact that we've got something we need to heal, and that's our responsibility. And I could go into stories Islamically where it puts that into context, where, you know, with the camel, you have to tie the camel, you've got feelings, so we need to take responsibility about healing them. And that's not something that is straightforward if you're not familiar with it. You have to experience it. So I know what you're saying, that you've held on to it, but if you were to go to a therapist, I think they would be able to pull it out more, rather than, this is quite general. This is about, let's bring your feelings up, don't let them be held down. Yours are already there, now we need to heal them. Okay. I hope that's kind of, you can stay on at the end and ask me more. I'm just generalizing. I brought this picture up because I wanted to kind of share that feelings come in different colors, different textures. And once we start working with our feelings, life is more like full of different things to experience. So emotions are very individual, having many layers to unravel and experience. And what I find is when people start tuning into their emotions, it's okay. It gets to a point where you feel it's okay now. It's going to hurt, but within the hurt, it's mine, and I'm going to take something from it. It's like you're looking after a part of you. And this is just one approach where I've brought this up in the past as well, and you can zoom into this emotional wheel. But if we struggle to put any language to our emotions, these are just some words that might help you connect that actually that's how I'm feeling. And in any situation where we create more awareness, we can then start from one point and attach more labels to it. And like I said, this is a very vague like starting point, but if you're struggling, it's something you can use. And you can find these kind of worksheets on Pinterest, and I'll put it on my website as well. So what I was going to ask you is if you think of a situation where you can identify a feeling and then expand on it. But I think we're going to be a bit rushed for time. This is the kind of stuff I'll explore in the workshops in between. I'm going to move on so we can get to the end. So emotions, they're going to be affected by the situation you're in as well and what you're used to. So what I'm pointing out here is this: when you think of emotions, there could be a lot of factors. Can't be like I said, you're going from one situation to another. So it's important that we work with all these different areas, like technology, that's going to drain us. So it's being aware that how, and then making choices really. There's certain things where it's financial, then it's that acceptance that actually I'm entitled to feel that way. And I like this because it says crying is how your heart speaks when your lips can't explain the pain you feel. I find in my work, when we can connect emotionally, it's quite powerful because we can sit with that. And I think a lot of people don't have that space in their life where their emotions can be just let out when the other person's just sat there on the other side holding it. And when you feel like that, it's so freeing, and it's such a pleasure for me. Because even when I think about some of the people that come and share that, even on Zoom, you know, when I share that, it's that connection, mashallah, even over Zoom, that is so warm and deep. So I suppose what I'm saying is there is a lot on the other side, but obviously we have to work with it, we have to share it, we have to explore. And this is about self-awareness. So, you know, we've not gone to the other levels of emotional intelligence. So are we denying ourselves something that is telling us more than words could ever say? You've got to feel it to heal it. Let's get to know our emotions because they can seem good or bad. We have to allow for all this. And can we see them? Not always have to. Do we have to make sense of them? It's useful, not always. Are they connected to like situations? They can. We explore all this and more. But the main thing is when we're doing this and exploring our emotions, it's central that we're compassionate to ourselves, and that's also something that a lot of adults struggle with. I like working with kids because they just go with it. They'll say, I want this. And I feel kids, you know, when you see them, mashallah, their emotions are there. But then obviously we start putting barriers on them because we have to protect ourselves. So it's knowing how to work our emotions with acceptance because there's a reason why they're there. Sometimes we overanalyze them and we judge them when, you know, I'm not saying all situations are the same either. Hang on, let me just see where I'm at with these worksheets. Right, I'm going to move forward because we might run out of time. So in summary, what I'm trying to say is, first and foremost, subhanallah, we've got our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I'm going to put some stuff on the website so you can look into that more, because he, mashallah, has got so many examples, and it's explained a bit more in depth in these talks as well, how we can learn from his example, inshallah. And through emotional awareness, we can reach a higher level of intelligence and spiritual awareness. I hope that's come through a little bit in today's sessions, and it seems like a lot of you guys are already aware of that. And it's important that we don't just look at it from the intelligence side. The spiritual thing is even higher, mashallah. To notice our emotions, we need to give our emotions an opening. I suppose this is just the information I'm delivering today, that we need to first give them an opening if you haven't done. If you feel like life's been too busy. And this is what I hear I'm going to finish off now and pass it over to Feroza, because then we're going to stop the recording. So if anybody wants to ask me some questions, you know, without being recorded, they've got that. But I suppose this is what my message is today, that let's start off with giving our emotions an opening, but we're not just saying just go with it and let loose. We want to be smart about it. But it's like you've got your emotions sat there and they've been kept in a box. They will explode, won't they? Because they can only hold so much as well, but they'll get intertwined with other stuff and life will get very messy and affect your health. So what I'm saying today is there a way in which you can allow the emotions? There probably will be certain areas where you feel safe and comfortable. Notice that, and then look at situations where you feel it's a struggle. Question that, why? Is it because I'm too busy with life? Can I slow it down a bit? Because I know it's always those kind of situations. If I give myself a 2-minute breathing space, I can at least acknowledge it. And sometimes just stopping and acknowledging those feelings, it's not as hard work as trying to keep them locked up and you know, keeping them where they don't get in the way, kind of thing. Feroza, am I all right to kind of let you take over?
You've got time on Zoom, don't worry.
I have. Okay, so is there any, shall I just ask if anybody wants to ask any questions?
Can I just ask you one thing, Saj? Can you give us one exercise to do which will help us apply what you've spoken about to give our emotions an opening? So if something comes up and I'm stressed or I'm upset, can you give me an exercise which will help me give my emotions an opening? What can I do just to get a start?
Before the situation, if things were just kind of normal and suddenly you feel something, it's an impact on you. And usually you'll notice either you're more alert or you go into shock. And that's why the other two sessions about anxiety, you would have noticed whether I'm becoming more on edge, or am I noticing that my blood circulation is faster. Feroza, do you get what I'm saying? So you need to actually notice that moment that something's happened to you. Because
yeah, I think it's knowing what's happening, but from that, how can I figure out what the problem actually is?
You need to give yourself a bit of a breather. So if I find I'm in a situation where suddenly something's come out of the blue, and I feel I'm a bit panicky, I will kind of make myself aware in that situation. So if I'm with the kids, I'll say, hang on a minute, I just need a breather. This is a bit uncomfortable. I'll say, so the kids can understand, but I will give myself a breather and acknowledge that actually what's going on. Is it because I've felt it? Sometimes it's just I feel this is uncomfortable. I can't even explain it. But then once this is the stage we're at, that you have to give yourself that space. But I don't know how to implement that in that situation. It'd have to be specific to what's doable in that situation. So if you're with somebody, right, and they make you feel uncomfortable, then you're aware. You take a moment to yourself. You can even block them out, and you can feel to yourself, hang on, what they've just said, it makes me feel uncomfortable, or the way they've just reacted to me, something's telling me that I'm not comfortable with that. So if you're aware of it, then when it happens again next time, you're going to be one step ahead and you can make a choice, and that's where we're heading. So all you have to do at this stage is acknowledge, does that, how I said, does the situation make you feel good or bad? So it could be something makes you feel better as well, because you can utilize that and think about that. When you're in a bad situation, you can remind yourself, actually, this is what I'm about, and those kind of things work for me. So at the moment, it seems like a small thing, but it's slowing down when you notice. So you're saying, I notice when I feel uncomfortable. Yeah, but what does that mean? Do you notice it's good, or is it bad? Does it make you feel wary? Does it make you feel drained? Identify that. But that's why we've got these 3 workshops in between, that everybody's going to have their own way of expressing their emotions. Some people would notice how strong that feeling is. Some situations I feel more threatened than others, and they can think, actually, that feeling makes me feel alert, but I like that feeling because it's going to make me work harder. So we have to communicate with our feelings. Is that something that is doable, or is that a bit too general?
No, that's really helpful. That's really helpful to just give myself space, not react. Yeah, definitely.
We're not saying don't react. We will get there, yeah. But we're going to do it from an informed. We're not going to sit back here and let the world take over. We're going to do it from an informed, controlled way, inshallah.
I've got one more comment. Being overwhelmed with too many problems at the same time affects your emotions immensely. This then leads to anxiety. It's often not too easy when you do not have much help and can't talk to someone straight away in the heat of the moment. How does one calm down?
I'm so sorry to hear that. There's a lot of that at the moment, isn't there? But it seems like your situation could have been there for quite a while. When you say there's a lot going on, in reality, sometimes we have to make choices if we can. Because if somebody comes to me and the problems are real, aren't they? That's your body saying we have to do something about it. We can't just adapt to situations and make everything feel better. So when somebody comes to me, I'll kind of separate which ones are actual real things that we have to deal with, but how can we cope with the situation better whilst we're dealing with it? So if you're feeling that there's too much and it's bombarding me, I can't just say, well, you can look at what's working for you, look at your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I know in reality we need to do something about all these problems. And when you're saying you've got nobody else to turn to, then it feels like you're not even able to turn to get any kind of comfort. So we need that, don't we? Because when we've got that anxiety and we're just in a state of survival, I just need to survive. But somebody, just having somebody who you can just lean on. I'm just wondering whether you want to stay on at the end, because I don't want to kind of make it sound like, let's just do something and make it feel better. It might not be the case, and I don't want to, the thing is, I don't want to undermine your situation. I suppose that's what I'm saying. Whereas if somebody said to me that actually I find it a struggle with the kids, then I'll say, well, where's your opening where you feel comfortable? And then what you can do is, if you just recharge yourself in a place where you feel safe, because that's the thing with anxiety, you feel threatened and you feel you can't cope. Identify with that space before you go into the situation, and then look at what is doable and let's break it down. Then we can make it doable, but we need some opening. I'm not going to say to you, let's do mindfulness or let's do resilience, because that's like you're just working on yourself. Is that okay? Shall we? If you can stay on at the end, maybe we can discuss it a bit further. Okay, Firoza?
So Jazakallah.
I'm just going to say the dua before we finish off, yeah? Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakallah, and stay on after Firoz is finished. If you've got any more questions, I've got time, inshallah.
So Jazakallah for the insight. These monthly sessions are to provide an overview of the topics, but if anybody needs a more in-depth service, there are practical sessions which were mentioned earlier, and it'll help you make individual changes. They are more tailored private sessions. So there'll be 3 additional group sessions run on the December 9th, 16th and 23rd. So it's next 3 Wednesdays. There's only capacity for 10 in each group because it is a more tailored Zoom session. And it will be a total cost of £15 for all 3 sessions. So there's limited capacity to allow for interaction and a more in-depth discussion if you need it. So you will be able to discuss and share your own experiences if you're comfortable with it, and they will not be recorded. So for data protection wise, these sessions will not be recorded. If you're interested, then please put an inquiry through to her website, which is sahi.co.uk, where you'll also find recordings of these workshops. She's hoping to run another workshop through Zakaria Mosque in about another month's time. You'll also get a feedback form at the end of this. Please send in your feedback. It helps the organisers arrange the next Zoom sessions. Alternatively, just pop a little feedback on her website if you prefer that. We're going to stop the recording now. Anybody who wishes to stay on,